David Serpa.
Eric, I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on the pod. And, so you're a veteran and you've written two books. You're also a business owner and you're running for Congress. You're running for California's 39th district. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I've written 5 books in total, but there's two that I'm running on, which is the Common Sense for California, A Guide to the New Revolution, Volume 1 and 2.
Your most recent book, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, yeah, so that's what I saw. That's what I saw. So you've written actually 5 books.
Yes, sir.
Wow. And what was actually your first book? What made you actually get into writing books?
Well, I was having a nervous breakdown and I wanted to pass along all of the information that I'd gotten through business and real estate
Mm,
and, the Marine Corps. And so I wrote
yeah.
this book called The Machine Gunner's Guide to Real Estate Accuracy by Volume. And then the second book that I wrote, after realizing that I was on the autism spectrum or am on the autism spectrum,
Hmm.
is All the World's a Stage, Unmasking Asperger's Syndrome. And then book 3 was Zen Business, an Eastern approach to the Western business climate. And then books 4 and 5 were Common Sense for California.
So all of this was after you served in the Marines.
Yes.
Okay, and also, so you're running as a Republican, but you
Yes.
recently registered as a Republican, actually.
Yeah. So I registered as a Republican about a year and a half ago to run for office. And
Mhm.
last time I tried to run as an independent, I wasn't able to get ballot access. That's kind of a long story, but we don't need to go there. I
Yeah.
was an independent for a while, a libertarian for a while. I registered with the Movement for a People's Party. But really, the reason why I decided to run as a Republican is because that is where the populist movement is right now. That's where the people's movement and momentum is. That's where the anti-war movement most importantly lies,
Hmm.
and that's where I most identify myself with. And I think that the MAGA movement overwhelmingly is going to be good for this country because I'm an economic nationalist. I believe in
Right.
putting Americans first, and there's a lot of ways that we can do that.
Yeah, because what we're seeing is that the Democrats are suppressing a lot of voices. And
Hmm.
when I was first introduced into politics was when Bernie Sanders ran, and Bernie Sanders was just suppressed throughout. And
Hmm.
sometimes I wonder if Bernie Sanders won as a I'm sorry, if he ran as a Republican without switching any of his policies, how well he would actually do as a Republican, as opposed, how he got suppressed when he ran for president as a Democrat, and we know he's an independent, but he is in the Democrat caucus, as I believe.
There's definitely a Bernie to Trump pipeline
Hmm.
where people, they got activated under Bernie and, the populist movement. Bernie was filling auditoriums, and he was absolutely suppressed in 2016. And the nomination was stolen from him. And this is not according to me. This is according to this is according to Tulsi Gabbard, who was the vice chair of
Hmm.
the Democratic Party at the time. This is, Lindsey Warren. So a lot of people realized that the nomination was stolen from Bernie Sanders and given to Hillary Clinton in 2016. And then in 2020, not only was Bernie suppressed, but Tulsi Gabbard, who did very well in the debates, didn't get an opportunity to see the light of day. And also Andrew Yang was intentionally left out of polling, left out of graphics, left out of debates, and he had a massive populist movement behind him in 2020.
Yeah, and
And then,
us.
we don't even have to mention what happened in 2024, which, there was not, really a whole heck of a lot of a primary process at all in the Democratic Party.
Yeah, there wasn't any at all. And, also RFK Jr., as we saw that he
Hmm.
went on to Trump's campaign. Um,
Yeah, you had RFK Jr., you had Marianne Williamson.
mhm.
There were people that tried to do everything the right way through the Democratic Party. But that's not what they award. They don't like dissonance in the Democratic Party. And so in the Republican Party, people are finding a home because they realize that they don't have to all think, look, act, the same, vote the same on every single issue in order to call themselves a Republican. That's where the big tent Republican Party is being built.
Yeah, and Trump and Bernie are very similar in that way, as Trump was also a populist, and the
Mhm.
Republicans also tried to stop Trump, but they just couldn't. It got out of control, and
Correct.
we saw what happened. So I see that a lot of your, at least some of your proposed issues align with Democrats, as
Hmm.
universal healthcare. We had Andrew Yang with universal basic income, and you
Hmm.
have the American dividend.
Hmm.
So like I see that you do share some of the values, and that's probably due to the fact that you just registered as a Republican, and Republicans kind of hold the populist voice right now. Uh,
Hmm.
so
And it tends to shift to the left and it shifts
mhm,
to the right, but we never really completely realize that it's not about the left and the right. It's about the people. And when we
mhm,
realize that we can have that populist message where we unify on what most people agree on and start imagining a better way forward, um, there's a reason why Andrew Yang had a lot of
mhm,
momentum, and it's because of UBI and his stance on UBI. And the UBI almost happened in the 1960s. It passed in the House. It almost passed the Senate, or vice versa. They thought that their bill would go higher. We talked about the peace dividend in the 60s
mhm,
as a way to incentivize Americans to get behind ending the war in Vietnam. The Alaskans have an oil dividend.
right.
The Saudi Arabians have an oil dividend. In addition to that, native tribes have figured out a way to pay a dividend to their tribes, their people based on how well their casinos are doing. And so I think that if America is going to be a business, then we should run that business uh, with a product, because businesses have a product, and that product should be lithium, uranium, oil, natural gas, coal, and water. And we should be banking on abundance instead of overly subsidizing these companies to fail when they try to capitalize on scarcity in energy and healthcare and whatnot. And so I think that through the American dividend, which would depend on cutting the deficit, getting to a surplus, and then issuing an American dividend, it would give the American people ownership of this American business. And then with healthcare, universal healthcare, it would save us money by implementing universal health care. We pay more than any other developed nation in the world for healthcare, and we are not covered. 62% of all bankruptcies are due to medical bankruptcies. 650,000 annual bankruptcies every year are due to medical debt. And so it is a matter of practicality at this point to focus on America's healthcare system. We can always afford to kill people, but we can't afford to heal people. That doesn't make any sense to me. And so what have is not. I have a plan. I believe that just as President Trump started the Department of the Air Force and called it the Space Force, we
Mhm.
have a Department of the Navy, and we call that the United States Medical Corps. And we reallocate 50% of that overinflated Department of Defense budget, and we put it into America to build our healthcare system, funded by our public taxpayer dollars to bring back the public hospital so that people aren't dying in the streets from things that we can cure them from, so that children aren't having to raise, bake cells for brain surgeries. We can do better in the richest country on earth.
No, yeah, and we see that a lot with GoFund. GoFund has been a source of a lot of families to be able to raise money for medical costs. And
It's
in
terrible.
yeah,
Number one fundraiser on GoFundMe is perpetually for people who cannot afford to pay their medical bills.
and that's just sad. I live in Vegas now, and
Hmm.
as we all know, Vegas is possibly one of the top tourist destinations, possibly in the world. and the casinos make a ton of money, but we also have a huge homeless problem here. A
Hmm.
lot of people are homeless in the sense that uh casinos would pay a dividend in in this other I would say like version of America, that casinos pay a dividend. It would lift a lot of people from poverty, and
Hmm.
it you see the difference in people's way of living. You
Hmm.
Because I see it all the time in Vegas. There is a huge gap or economic gap because you have people living in terrible conditions, but you have also people living in abundant conditions.
It's
But
the carrot and the stick
yeah,
mentality that we drive the American people with that's driven us into becoming wage slaves and debt slaves and sharecroppers, which are old names for, old chains. But at this point, we have been beaten into submission. We don't even realize that we have been divided and conquered and colonized because we're all so terrified that we're going to slip up and not be able to keep our head above water. The American dream has been for sale to the highest bidder. We've watched the way that it's become completely unattainable for the average person. And just like you're talking about with the extreme juxtaposition of wealth,
right.
I was in a position where I was making, over $600,000 a year. I felt very weird about it. I grew up very poor, and so I know what it's like to have some money, and there gets to be a point to where it's like, how much do you really need, and compared to the people that are outside. But really, it's not about just the average person or even someone who's doing really well. It's not the haves versus the have nots. It's the have nots versus the have yachts. It's that
Mhm.
wealthy 0.01% that are that are old family money, that are controlling our wealth and our resources more so than anything else, and create situations where you know we went out to dessert one time for a family member's birthday party, and it was at the sugar factory in San Diego,
Yeah.
and there were homeless people everywhere, and there was this man who was defecating on the side of the building, and while we were walking by, and we locked eyes at one point, I could tell that he was ashamed. And that, but we don't have public restrooms, so, and you have to buy something in order to go to the bathroom in America. And, we don't have mental health facilities. We don't have transitional housing. We don't have public housing. And so we force all these people into situations where they're under bridges, absolutely struggling, living on the sides of buildings, defecating on the side of a building. And then I go inside, and we pay, I think, $500 for dessert, and it comes out, it's on fire, and it's a big show, and there's a great selfie wall and
Mhm.
everything. But it's that juxtaposition of extraordinary wealth, and then right outside you've got people struggling to survive.
Right, because it's not just helping homeless people have a better um life, but it's just the lack of opportunity that some people have. If someone wants to get
Hmm.
ahead, it's harder for some people than it is for others. And some people just don't have the same
Correct.
opportunities.
That no, that's absolutely right. There are people who can't just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and that they do struggle, mentally or physically, or they're just, they're not, they don't have as many capabilities, and through no fault of their own. It's not like, oh, if we had just, done better or whatnot. Some people are going to fall through the cracks, and I feel like our job in the richest country on earth, and I live in the richest state in that country, is to make sure that we're doing better than uh, you know um, the way that people are currently being treated. And so I think that you can't have housing first initiatives, which is where the Democrats go wrong. I graduated from high school homeless. I know what it's
Mhm.
like to be in that community, and there aren't enough resources that are public. We depend far too much on nonprofits and individual charity, and the system has been tapped out completely. And so, we do need a shelter first initiative that would give people an opportunity to be in a Conestoga hut with a door that locks, a place where they can keep their stuff, where they can establish residency. And you could do this inside of this abundance of warehouses that we have all throughout the Inland Empire or throughout Vegas. I know that there's a lot there, so that people have an opportunity to establish a residence, so that they can get a job, so that they can receive medication and mental health treatment and the supports and services that they need, and have access to showers all centrally located in one area.
Right. And some people just don't have that. And that's, what they need to at least be able to pull themselves up. And it's not
Hmm.
just their economic situation, but it's also mental health and the lack of care that we have.
Hmm. No, that's correct. I've struggled with mental health. I checked myself into the VA in February of 2018, and I walked in there wondering what was wrong with me. And I walked out with a list of things that were wrong with me and a bag full of medication. And at no point during that time that I was in there did I see a provider. Did I see an actual healthcare provider, a therapist? And so, we're not doing right by our veterans, but we're not doing right by anybody. And that's kind of what kills me is people, we qualify care. We say our veterans should not be going without health care. Nobody should be going without health care at this point. We have 30.8% of all of the world's wealth and resources in
Mhm.
America and 5% of the population. Why are we not living in abundance? And it's because our elites, which is what a lot of people call them, I don't call them elites, I call them oligarchs, have found a way to hoard all of our wealth and resources and make it so that the rest of us don't own our homes, we don't own our businesses, we don't own the land that our homes sit on. And so freedom is financial freedom. We are raising the least free generation in American history.
And it's not getting any better.
It's not getting any better because they have a plan for things to get worse. So, if that's systemic injustice, it requires a systemic response. We have to be able to think about things, get organized, realize that our enemies are not our neighbors, and then we have to start advocating for real change. And in order to do that, we have to outline what has happened,
Mhm.
and so that we can get lessons from the past and also understand how we got here, and then outline a vision for the future that we can work towards. And that's what I did with my books, Common Sense for California, which is why they were over 900 pages long, which is why I had to publish them in two books, because I just want to pack it full of information, full of ideas, so that people can go out there and run with it and not depend on me, because God knows what is going to happen to me when I start talking about taking on the military industrial complex, when I start talking about giving the American people ownership of this American business through the American dividend, when I start talking about nationalizing our oil and our resources and our lithium and our uranium and taking on these multinational corporations which have designed a system that doesn't serve us, then who knows? Who knows? But just because um, it's scary does not mean that it is not a reason not to go forward. It just means that I have to develop that contingency plan, which is why I wrote the book.
No, yeah, and I also face the same concern because having a podcast, I need to be careful of what I say and what the conversation that is held in the podcast, because as we've seen, a lot of people are getting censored. YouTube has censored a lot of information. Sometimes it could
Hmm.
be because of COVID, and if you go against the narrative, they'll just take down your video. And
There's
that,
kind of a list of things that, and I'm not going to bring them up
uh,
because it will make it so that, I can't use these clips, you can't use the video. But what happened to freedom of speech? What happened to, and unfortunately, we don't have it. There is no free speech anymore. You have to purchase it. And so there are certain things that we are not even allowed to discuss. And I've always been of the mindset of give me an opponent Give me somebody who I think might be ignorant, give them a microphone and a platform, and let's talk about it because I
Mhm.
might be wrong. But if what we do is we shut down one entire side of a narrative and we don't allow people to talk about it, then it's extraordinarily unfortunate. And what it forces us to do is to self-censor so that we don't get removed or banned. And it's very unfortunate because there are conversations that need to be had, and but it's a way that they do it because they can't pew it out of all of us anymore,
Mhm.
but they can ban us. You had Fred Hampton Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King, you had Malcolm X, MLK, RFK Jr., JFK, uh, excuse me, RFK Senior, JFK. They try to get Reagan, they try to get Trump. You have all of these populist messages and peaceful messengers, and they used to just completely cut the head off the snake. Now there are so many heads emerging that they're trying to do different things to try to limit speech so that the message doesn't get out there. But I think it's going to overwhelm them. It's
Right.
a unity message. We want to unify. We're tired of this division.
Well, I mean, those people are like sending a message with what they're doing, clearly.
Hmm.
But
It's unfortunate, but the thing is big tech owns the narrative at this point. It's not even just about Fourth Amendment rights or First Amendment rights, because they're free companies, and so they're able to circumnavigate these censorship laws by just saying, "Oh well, it's a private company."
yeah, and I just wonder what's really going to happen with journalism at that point.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, lots of fiction writers have written about these times before. And, that's really what I enjoy doing is I enjoy writing. And so, people have said, well, what are you going to do if you don't win? You know what I mean? And there's a big part of me that would really love to just write about the fiction that is going to becoming reality because, I'm naturally a pretty introverted person. I
Mhm.
enjoy my privacy and I enjoy being able to, write and do something artistic and creative, but unfortunately, there is not time for that. I feel like right now in my life because I don't want this fiction that we have been warned about by, like George Orwell. Everything
Mhm.
has become very Orwellian, um, or Ray Bradbury, and Fahrenheit 451, and I just it's we're there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where the narrative is being controlled.
Yeah, like I don't claim to be a journalist. I have no aspirations to become a journalist. I don't ever claim to be right. But even
Mhm.
just having a platform, I do fear that mm, I will be censored just for saying, well,
Mhm.
this is my opinion right now. My opinion could always change.
Mhm.
But not even being able to have a discussion, to have your opinions change is
Mhm.
what the problem is.
Correct. And why can we not just have the conversations? And it's because they, and people don't like when you say they,
Mhm.
don't like when you have the conversations because it hurts their bottom line financially. And who are they? They are BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and they own everything. And they don't want us getting tied in together and having these conversations. But at this point, that Leviathan has gotten so big and so greedy and gotten to be such a big beast. And there's so many of us that are rising up to take it on that, I really feel like we've got a chance. But we have to do is we have to outline what the narrative is, what is common sense, and we have to get control of our water. You know, there is so much big business that is control in just the state of California. We could look at, but it also has implications for Nevada because that city is being built out in the desert and it's not getting any smaller. And so one of the things that we could do is line our coast with desalination plants and start funneling fresh water inland and start, selling Nevada water from California,
Right.
or just make it a national investment, which I think would be even more intelligent. So then that way we could start not just building cities, but growing food out in the desert and growing agriculture, making it more possible for more independently owned family farms to make resurgence. So, the Resnicks own 150 billion gallons of water rights in California every year that they bought in a closed door meeting up in Northern California in Monterey. National Geographic did a piece on this called The Water Heist. Nestle, now called Blue Triton Brands, owned, or excuse me, did not own, they purchased a permit for $2,100 that they've been extracting water out of the San Bernardino National Forest for years, about 25 times their annual allotted permit, which was 2.1 million gallons annually for $2,100. But they've been drilling on this expired permit, extracting water for the last 40 years. And so our water is being taken over. So what is the response? Well, the response is that we bank on abundance so that these private companies can't continue to capitalize on scarcity. We line our coast and desalination plants. We funnel our fresh water inland with the understanding that the water levels are rising. 75% of the world is covered in water. So it would benefit us to start funneling that fresh water inland. And then, of course, energy. I was listening to one of your podcasts and I was
Mhm.
pretty disappointed by the gentleman that was on there speaking about he says, uh, we shut down San Onofre nuclear power plant and there hasn't been any repercussions. I'm like, yeah, tell me about your energy bill. Tell me
Mm.
about your energy bill. Tell me about how much that's exploded. And so when you capitalize on scarcity with these awful private companies that are being ran by greed, not serving the American people, you get things like the shutting down of nuclear power plants. Well, why are they shutting down nuclear power plants? Well, in 1992, under the 1992 energy bill that President Bush Sr. signed on his way out of office, America privatized all of our uranium and most of our private energy. And so
Mhm.
you had them purchasing up a lot of this, and uranium is what I like to focus on because nuclear energy is the future. And what did private companies do? They made a big boondoggle of it. They screwed it all up. And so they shut down our last nuclear enrichment facility in 2014. There are four stages that uranium needs to go through in order to be utilized for energy. And we don't even do all four of them in America. In fact, Russia enriches 38% of the world's uranium, which is where our uranium goes to be enriched. And so you have these private companies not doing their damn job. And of course, that becomes a problem. And so what do? President Biden signs an executive order to allocate $2.9 billion more of public money, our money, towards these private companies. And who is the largest owner of uranium in Wyoming, where the largest deposits are? BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. And so the public, which has been investing in nuclear energy for years, and in fact, we built 48 nuclear power plants in 5 years at one point. So it's definitely possible. Um, we've been investing in the creating of the nuclear power grid, and then they want to privatize everything and sell it off to private enterprise. I don't think that that passes the stink test.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's not only with that, but it's also with a lot of issues. And
Hmm.
I think the entire situation of COVID actually opened our eyes to
Hmm.
how corrupt the government is, and I'm not talking about being financially corrupt, but just ideally corrupt, and
Hmm.
how they just want to suppress any opposing voices from coming after them.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at the way that this hurricane is being handled right now with FEMA. Congress was aware that this hurricane was going to hit. They had an opportunity to send an additional $6 billion in funding to FEMA, and they did not vote on it. They did not send a dime towards the hurricane relief effort. They haven't called an emergency session to go back to Congress to take care of the American people that are suffering across multiple states. And instead, they continue to fund the destruction of Ukraine and Russia. And this kills me. And
Mhm.
not only are American people dying here and they're not being taken care of consciously, but we are funding the destruction of human beings on the other side of the planet. I'm tired of these proxy wars. And whenever I get somebody from the left or the right, they always want to say, well, what about this war? And I'm like, is that what compassion looks like? Is that what it looks like? 400,000, dead Ukrainians. Is that what compassion looks like? 4 to 500,000, dead Russians. Lindsey Graham saying this is the great investment, a great investment. You absolute maniac, you absolute destructive human being. You like that? What a disgusting thing to say. And the problem is it doesn't just come from one side of the aisle. I can't even remember this guy's name, but the Democrat that was out there signing these nuclear warheads, and you've got 55 members of Congress who financially benefit from defense stocks every time that a country goes to war. And I'm tired of calling them defense stocks. It's not defense. We're not defending our border. These are war. These are war stocks. And why do we have 55 members of Congress financially benefiting every time that our country or another country goes to war and human lives are lost?
Yeah, because the system does not work for the American people.
It doesn't. That's exactly right. And it's not that it doesn't work. It does work exactly the way that they want it to work. General Smedley Butler talked about this almost 100 years ago after he got back from World War One. He wrote a pamphlet, a short book called War is a Racket. You could listen to the whole thing on YouTube. And he went around speaking about how he was used as muscle for big business. And this isn't some, entry level soldier who did a few years and understands a little bit. We're talking about the most decorated Marine of all time at that point, who had two medals of honor. And he was approached to stage a coup called the business coup, or the business plot. And he blew a whistle and testified in front of Congress because big business was trying to use Smedley Butler to overthrow the government. And ultimately, who won in the end? They just purchased it. It just took them a longer time to do it. And you had President Eisenhower, talking about the military industrial complex on his way out the door. This is nothing new. We fund 73% of the world's authoritarian dictatorships. We have 172,000 troops deployed throughout 178 countries throughout the world. When is it too much? When is it just absolute and total imperialism? At what point do we overextend ourselves like Rome and fall from within due to rapid devaluation of our own currency because we can no longer continue to hold the world hostage at the point of a gun without an economic response or a physical response, a war response?
Right. I mean, it comes down to following the money because this
Yes.
wasn't that much of an issue before 9/11. I want to say that after 9/11, it was the beginning of the never-ending wars.
Mm. So the thing is if you look throughout our history, at what point were we not engaged at war at some point? And you could really look back, because we had the Korean War, but then we always have these conflicts throughout the world.
Mm.
And we staged over 80 conflicts, and I can't remember the exact number, maybe 82 conflicts from the year 1942 to the year 2000. We staged over 82 coups, excuse me. Is that what I said? And then we have 15 active conflicts right now happening throughout the globe. And so, we are regularly staging coups throughout the rest of the world. We are engaging in the overthrowing of either democratically elected people or authoritarian dictators. But either way, it is not our business. Congress has not declared war since 1942, and yet we continue to hold the world hostage at the point of a gun. This is it's completely unconstitutional, and furthermore, it's destructive. We can't keep it up.
Yeah, and you also talk about banning Congress from investing in individual stocks. And this
Absolutely,
may
and their
solve some of
families.
the. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. And their families. Yeah, ban them from trading stock. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, because what we see not only with wars, but the decisions that they make that affect the companies that they should be regulating, but
Uh-huh.
they get rich at the end.
Yeah, the trading stock is absolutely wild. In fact, there are people that have developed, I think, a stock trading algorithm where they trade whenever Nancy Pelosi trades, and they just match her stock, and they're all performing very well. And so it's just gotten absolutely ridiculous. There are plenty of ways for you to enrich yourself in Congress during your time in Congress that are legal, that don't require that you are financially benefiting from insider information. And uh, looking at the way that they do that, and there's so many of them that do it. uh, it should just, if you are there to serve, you're being paid $179,000 a year. And I understand maintaining two residences and whatnot, and they make a lot of complaints. But if you're not willing to serve, go get a different job. If you're not willing to make it a little bit of a struggle or whatever, get a little bit of a, get a different job. Don't serve. You swore an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, not to live comfortably while you're during your time in Congress and to be able to enrich yourself. I'm tired of the corruption. It comes from both sides of the aisle. It has to get stamped out. And not only does it come from insider trading, but it comes from direct campaign contributions. There's so much money at this point involved in politics that I'm worried that we've gone down a slippery slope that we're never going to be able to get back from.
Yeah, and for one example, taking it back to California, we saw how Gavin Newsom passed a was it a bill for the minimum wage, and
Yes,
it affected
the fast food workers.
fast food workers, fast food companies or franchises, but not franchises that have a bakery, which is Panera Bread. And the top franchisor of Panera Bread, it was a contributor to Gavin's campaign.
Mhm. Significant. Yeah, he made pretty significant campaign contributions, and applying it to where they just bake bread was absolutely wild. So he came under some heat under that and ended up taking it out. But a lot of people were very frustrated and saying, "Oh, fast food workers, don't need to make more money." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? We're not going to talk about the fact that all of these companies again are owned by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, and so all of these fast food workers, if we are going to pay them better, we don't have to talk about squeezing even the franchise owner. Maybe we just need to decide whether or not this franchise system is really serving anyone other than the big franchise holders that are benefiting on Wall Street. So it's no longer I'm no longer going to begrudge people from seeing success, just like the dock workers.
Mhm.
They had this big union strike that was looming, and they were able to negotiate to get a pretty significant pay increase for as long as their job continues to exist, of course, because our economy is continuing to shift. But what happened was during COVID, it was highlighted just how much we import.
Mhm.
We import 90% of our pharmaceuticals from China. And if a supply chain is to get shut down, we could see how quickly that something like that would become a significant problem. And so I do think that President Trump has the right idea by talking about manufacturing here in America again, by encroaching tariffs, putting tariffs on countries that are importing goods, because we have to have a sustainable economy. And in order to have a sustainable economy, we have to get our manufacturing firing on all cylinders again, because that will mean good jobs. It will bring back our middle class, because we imported cheap goods and then we exported our middle class.
Mhm. And not only
There was
that,
this illusion that everyone in America was going to get this white collar job and we were all going to be working on laptops, at home or doing creative work. And that's not sustainable. We can't just live in sell, shipping, and service. We need to make something again. But I'm sorry,
Mhm.
Eric, I interrupted you.
No, no, you're fine. But not only that, also close the loopholes because I know there are certain loopholes that if like what does it mean for a product to be manufactured in the US if the source goods
Hmm.
are coming from China? So are certain products mainly manufactured in China but end up being finished in the US and now they're US products, and that's a loophole that some companies actually use.
No, you're absolutely right. And the difficulty is we can get right back into lithium. So
Mhm.
lithium is what we need for all these smart TVs, all of our computers, all of our batteries, all of our Teslas and whatnot, our solar panels. They all need lithium. And it just so happens that we have 34 million tons of lithium out here in the Salton Sea in California. But do the people own that lithium? The people do not. Berkshire Hathaway, I think, runs 10 of the 11 enrichment facilities that are out there. So it's not a matter of whether or not we are going to start extracting lithium. We are going to do it. They're just trying to sort out who's going to benefit financially from all of it. And so I believe that the Congress needs to exercise eminent domain to take control over our lithium and our uranium, our oil, our natural gas, our coal, and our water so that we can make these abundant resources for the people and stop allowing our oligarchs to capitalize on enforced scarcity because that's what they're doing. We found 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas recently, and then 2 years later we ban the gas stoves.
Mm.
This sort of stuff is ridiculous. It's because whenever they find an abundant resource, they want to privatize it and then they want to ration it back to us at a premium. And I'm tired of watching it because this is destructive. The people that are getting by right now after the hurricane, they're getting by on their gas stoves. They're not their electrical grid is out. And so we have to be more intelligent about the way that we are designing our grid, the way that we are designing our systems, so that the shining city on a hill has the lights on for everyone.
Yeah, because there's still hope. And
There is.
California is going downhill and you see it a lot because you are in real estate and you see
Hmm.
a lot of people moving out of California. Um,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have to be
For the
that way.
last 10 years, I've sat with people as they have made a very tough decision to leave the state of California. It is not something that a lot of people do very lightly.
Mm.
There are generations of family members that are entrenched in this state, and it's very difficult for people to just get up and move. And there's a lot more of us that can't get up and move. Whether, we've got elderly family members, or we've got blended families, or we've got generations that we don't want to leave behind, but we're being placed between a rock and a hard place. My sister and her family moved up to Washington State. My other sister and her family moved out to West Virginia, and so I miss my family.
Mm.
Our cousin, all the little kids, all my kids and the cousins should be able to grow up together, but we've made it so difficult for people to exist here. But you're right, there is hope. And it is going to have to come from us, planting our back foot and taking a swing back. I teach my kids how to box. Sometimes when you're getting your butt kicked and you're absolutely somebody's got you on your heels and you are backing up, you have to plant that back foot so you could get off of your heels and you have to swing back with all your might, whether you connect or not,
Mm.
because right now we are on our heels, we are backpedaling, we're getting our butts kicked all over the ring, but it's time for us to swing back, and we have an opportunity to do it. But in California, we have to define what Republican principles are, what the Republican platform is, and then we have to get out strong candidates who can articulate that message, because we've been far too satisfied with running candidates that the cat drags in and that are satisfied with getting a participation trophy instead of actually genuinely trying to win. And people look at these districts and like, oh, it's so Democrat, it's so heavily stacked up against us. And it's like, well, yeah, it's because we haven't been showing up to the fight. We've been phoning it in, and that's been happening for a long time in California. It's just been like this whole, oh, why vote in California? It's a wasted vote. Oh, you got to give up on California. And it's a
Mhm.
narrative that's being pushed that does not serve us as Californians.
Yeah, I mean, I just moved to Nevada from California, and I see it.
Eric, come back. So why'd you leave?
Mainly because the cost of living in California was just getting out of control. You pay a premium, but you don't receive a premium back.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow.
At one point, like, I've talked to people before and, I had somebody tell me, people don't mind high taxes and whatnot because if you've got the great weather and the streets are clean and they're safe and, business is thriving and it's a good climate for, business, it's a good place to raise your kids and the schools are good. But, all of these different things that he's listing off, we used to have in California, but we don't have them anymore. And so you're paying for the premium and you're not getting an opportunity to enjoy it. And even the natural beauties in California are difficult to get out there and enjoy because
Mhm.
we're all being squeezed financially from all ends that we no longer have any free time anymore. And so everyone's just struggling to survive here. And the people that are not struggling to survive, I don't know what's going on that they don't look at the people that are and have a little bit more compassion for them and realize that things really need to change. But what happens, brother, is that
Mhm.
eventually it's that whole, first they came for this group of people, but I didn't say anything because I wasn't one of those. You know, uh, it's getting applied to all of us.
Yeah.
The wicked ways in which we have tolerated that the poor have been treated, we are all getting treated that way now. The wicked ways that we allowed the Black community to be treated. Well, now we're all being treated like that now. We can't afford to buy homes in the communities that we grow up in. We can't get a good education at the schools in our communities. We can't afford to start businesses in our communities. And so you can't expect people to maintain hope if there's not somebody out there, so few people out there leading from the front in whatever way that they can, so that everybody can do their piece. Because there's too many people that have been shrugging their shoulders for too long.
Mhm.
It's the apathy that needs to be broken.
Right. Well, listen, David, I truly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for everything that you're doing, for keeping up the fight and having hope that California could change.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate you having me on your show. Appreciate the support. Thank you for helping me get the message out there.
No problem. Anytime. Thank you.